So what I want to do is start off at the point where I finished off in the last video on this topic and show you how this can be fairly easily adapted to create different patterns. So I thought I would show you how to introduce some colour into this, which is quite easy. Go into the Skylab, and from the Atmosphere tab you can add Blend with Sun, and then if you make the sun a very distinct colour and move it round towards the horizon where it has more influence, although we can't preview it for the reasons outlined before, you can now add some colour. So you should now see there's a red tint in there, and because of the arrangement of the inside of this cube, you're going to get the effect appearing in opposite reflections. So in some places they're combining, in some places they're cancelling out. Well, that's how it looks. The other thing is, you could copy and paste this cube and convert it to a sphere, for example, and use this to interact with the inside of this reflecting box. So if I modify the material on this sphere, which will have adopted the material from the outside of the box to be, I'm going to modify it to be 100% transparent. I'll need to turn the diffuse up to fully white so that it will let the light travel all the way through. So I'm being put off because Camtasia Studio is floating this menu that I'll go see if I can get rid of it by just nipping in and out of the deep texture editor. That's good. Right, because I wanted to show you, without losing this blob, that we can remove reflection from the outside of this sphere. So if I just go out of here and turn the refraction right up, what happens is, as a result of refraction, you automatically get some reflection. That's as a property in Bryce. Just as when you get reflection, you automatically get some specularity. And in this preview, which is a default lighting setup, not the lighting setup we're using, you get a default sun with, you've got so much ambient, so much diffuse, and so much specular. So it makes it difficult to judge the results, because if we put in here a blob for the reflection, and then go into the deep texture editor and just use this highly negative output, we can have negative reflection, which means we can remove the reflection from the outside of the sphere but still have it transparent and refractive. Now, the refraction is not going to have any effect at the moment because optically we are in the centre of this sphere, but I can show you just the effect of using this sphere as a cutter for the reflection inside. So, oh, there's a spot there. That's come from the specular halo setting. So if I set that right up, you'll see now the negating effect of the reflection as it's interacting with this. But if we go back into our render and render from the camera perspective here, you can't see very much because this sphere is now removing quite a bit of light from the inside. If I go to the cube, modify the material up to amplify the light reflection, so it's now offsetting with the amount of light that's absorbed, and then just reduce the size of the sphere slightly so it's absorbing less of the reflected light, you can see now a pattern is forming that's emerging from the result of the sphere set in the middle, cancelling out some of the reflections because it can't reflect off the surface of the sphere. So that looks quite interesting, and it renders fairly quickly. So that's one option. The anti-aliasing is removing the weaker lights. But another thing you could do, just using the sphere's properties and taking advantage of the fact, without negating the reflection, that with this high level of refraction you do get a bit of reflection on the surface, then you could offset that against the amplifying reflection and get sort of the patterns working against one another. So where the reflections are passing around the outside of the sphere, they will tend to amplify up. When the reflections hit the sphere, they'll get suppressed, but in this case they're not getting cancelled, they're just getting toned down a bit. So you can see the render time's a little bit higher, but the complexity of the pattern should go up quite a bit. So as I say, it's just a matter of offsetting these two effects against one another, and it's difficult to anticipate what the result's going to be until you've seen the anti-aliasing pass. So I'll pause the video at this point and then you can see the results in a few minutes. And I could see from the anti-alias pass that it was going to come out too weak. So what I'm going to try is enlarging the cube a bit so that it can get more haze in it. Enlarge the sphere a bit so it mops up a bit more light, and then I'm going to narrow the field of view. Whoops, that's wrong control there. Narrow the field of view so that it's going to zoom in a bit on the image. So we just need to adjust the size of these things like so to have just sort of a judgment of whether that's going to be the right sort of scale. I mean, it's all got to be done with guesswork anyway. So the thing to do now, I'll try and render a small part of this and see if we're getting more of a balance between the two effects. So what I'm looking for is the scaling up and also a suppression that's coming from the sphere that's doing the reflecting. Okay, the render time's gone up, so that means there's more interaction between the two. And so I'll just let this render on out, but it's looking a bit more promising because there are some brighter areas. So it's just getting the contrast right and the amount of reflection and absorption balanced off against each other to see the pattern emerge. I mean, you could see it before, but it was a bit weak, and when it goes through its final anti-aliasing pass, if the points are very small, then they're going to get anti-aliased out of existence. So really it's dependent on how this turns out when it anti-aliases, which may or may not be right. So I'll just pause the render here and we'll see what it looks like at the end and if it's any good. So while I've been waiting for this to anti-alias, which as you can see is taking some time, the reason being there's a great density of information in this because of all the interreflections, I started experimenting with another variant which is rendering a bit faster, and this is one where I've used a cube within the cube. Use the refractive index of glass, so that's 153, so that's this optical effect of creating this distortion. Even though it's in a cube face, because it's not inside a sphere, you're having optical effect of the refraction because the distance of the camera to the surface is changing, and then the angle of view. In a sphere, if you place a camera in the middle of a sphere, the angle of view through the lens surface is always the same because it's looking perpendicular. But if you're looking at a flat surface, the angle of view is changing from where you're looking perpendicular as straight forward to the side, so the refractive index in that case does have an effect. So, long story short, if you use our refractive index on a cube within the cube, as is this example, then it allows you to generate different effects. I've used the haze colour again, and I'll just show you the material properties when this is done. So we'll just let this one render out, and I'll do a save as quickly. So file, save as, let's incremented the number, so you can see I've had a few goes at this, and I'll go to this one which appears to have done file, save as, and I won't overwrite that one I've just done. I'll save that as 5, and then we'll just have a quick look at the material properties. So there's the cube, that's just the reflective cube as before, so you know the material settings for that, and I copy and pasted this one to this cube and modified the material as I did earlier in the video. So I've just got a negative function which is in there, which you can see, and that is just providing a negative reflection. So if I set the specular halo up, you'll see the effect of that. There you go, in this particular lighting, but that's not the lighting that we're using. Transparency 100, refraction of 153, diffuse full value white. So if I now you'll see that this renders much more quickly because of the use of the negative reflection. There's no additional reflections inside these areas as a result of reflecting off the surface of the cube, so that just renders out a bit quicker, and that's the result you get from that, which is quite interesting. And there's a result from the other one. So anyway, I thought you might find that interesting, that you'll experiment with these yourself and create your own abstracts using this approach. Well, that's the hope.